who should we invest in when we look at alternative energies? Now, one other thing I'd like to point out before we get cruising on this is that you can hear different terms thrown around. Renewable energy. What that means is that the earth replaces it as we use it, so we don't run out. Sometimes we use the word alternative energy. Well, alternative energy typically is talking about renewable, but it may not be. Nuclear is really an alternative energy. What alternative means is alternative to fossil fuels. But nuclear is technically not renewable. We could run out of the radioactive isotopes that we need. Some of them are very difficult to obtain. Another term that's thrown out there is green energy. Green. Now, if you ask me, these all really mean the same thing. Renewable, alternative, green. They're all talking about the different options from fossil fuels. But green means zero emissions. Zero emissions. So you could argue that something like geothermal, which I'll show you today, is not really technically green. It's more renewable than it is green because it has some pollution associated with it. Biofuels. Those are alternative, but they're not really green. So let's start there. Let's get the bad ones over with. I'm not a huge fan of biofuel or biomass. Now, this is considered renewable because we grow it. It's wood. We can burn wood to make energy. This is the simplest form of energy we've been using for ever since humans have discovered fire, obviously. In undeveloped nations, this is the #1 source of energy. There are still places in the world that do not have electricity, access to a grid, and they still burn wood. You can burn other things besides wood. Remember, I told you that charcoal was not actually coal. Remember, there's some problems here. Obviously, burning biomass, you're burning carbon. So you're putting carbon into the air, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. And if you're growing product to burn it for energy, well, that doesn't help us with all that stuff we learned about just before semester break, all the feeding the world unit. Problematic. Biofuel is used when we convert it to liquid form. Biomass in liquid form. Now, lots of pros and cons here. I have uploaded this document to Canvas. So if you don't want to write all this down, you can screenshot it, download it, all that good stuff. But you can see some of the good and bad, and you guys have even researched some of this on your own last week. There's a couple that jump out at me, though. There are certain places we don't want to grow crops because the land's polluted. But if we're not going to eat it, we don't care if the land's polluted. So this is a great solution for places that we've made toxic. We can naturally recover that land by letting things grow there. And then since we're burning it, no harm, no foul with all that. We got 200 million acres of polluted, unusable land in this country that we could grow biofuel on. Fossil fuels were dug up out of the ground. That was carbon that was stored from the sun that was supposed to stay in the ground. Some of it is millions of years old. So when we burn it, we're putting that carbon into the air and it's not supposed to be there. But where did the carbon come from for plants? Well, it came from the air, like just while the plant was growing. So all we're doing is taking the carbon that was already in the air a few weeks ago and burning it and putting it back. So a lot of environmentalists who are fans of biofuel will argue, hey, it's not as bad because it's really just a carbon exchange back and forth. We're not adding to the carbon footprint. We're just returning it. I think that's a pretty weak argument because we know there's a whole bunch on the con side, but whatever makes them feel better, I guess. Yeah, the other thing is we don't necessarily have to use plants. We've discovered that algae are able to produce hydrocarbons. Some of them digest and give off methane, natural gas. And so we're getting much more technology, which solves some of the cons that you see on the right-hand side, right? Habitat loss, using fertilizer. We don't need that stuff for algae. If we're getting biofuel from microorganisms, we all of a sudden have solved a couple of the problems on the right. Food prices, air pollution. Yeah, anything that we still burn, in my opinion, is not a solution. So please understand that biomass, biofuel are still burning. The good thing about that, some might argue, is that, well, we don't have to change our infrastructure. We could use this stuff in the infrastructure that we already have. But once again, as an environmentalist, that infrastructure is garbage. It's a problem. Until we get rid of that, we're not making progress. Also, it turns out biofuel's not quite as efficient as gasoline. The energy that goes into producing it is worse than what we're doing with crude oil. We don't have to make biofuel from algae. We can. We don't have to make it from corn. Indiana grows a whole bunch of corn for biofuel. We can make it out of other things too. It turns out that sugar cane, think about what sugar is. C6H12O6. C and H, hydrocarbons. Sugar is energy. Glucose, that's where we get our energy from. So sugar cane is a great source for hydrocarbons. And unfortunately, one of the ways that they process sugar cane to get the ethanol, the alcohol out of it, is they burn it. Well, you can see the problem with that in terms of air pollution. This is down in Brazil, who is the world's leading producer of biofuel from sugarcane. But we've discovered a second side effect of this that's even worse, in my opinion. When you burn sugarcane and it rains, the runoff is acidic. And so you've now made the soil around there with a very low acidic pH. And once again, a pro and a con here, depending on which side you're on. We can use our current infrastructure. There are lots of different options now for biofuel. And if you buy a vehicle, you can open up the owner's manual. And there's also usually a sticker on the side of the driver's door. And it'll tell you if your car can use these or not. And most of them today, if your car is made within the last 5-10 years, most of them can use E85, which would be the best to use. That's going to give you the most benefit of, once again, exchanging carbon rather than burning old carbon. And in Indiana, we push E85 pretty hard because we make it. We're one of the leading producers of E85 in the United States. So basically burning corn. You can see what the numbers mean. E85 is 85% ethanol, hydrocarbon, and only 15% crude oil, refined gasoline. If you study biochemistry in college, you'll learn all of this. But this is the process that turns algae into alcohol and diesel. Basically, you ferment it just like you would a grain to make alcohol to drink. Now, look at that. A lot of people argue that, well, these big algae farms are just as environmentally a problem in terms of land use. And so scientists have addressed that. This is the old way. The problem was it just wasn't efficient. We couldn't make enough biofuel by having to have these large-scale algae farms. So we brought the operation indoors. We've learned to grow algae vertically in lots of different formations here. Reminds me of those organic gardens that were indoors that we looked at first semester. Really innovative engineering going on here. So we're making baby steps at even making biofuel more green. But as I've already stated, to me, it's got more problems than benefits. So geothermal, I actually do think is a great energy source. You can see it does not have much in the way on the advantages side or pros side. However, it's incredibly efficient compared to a lot of the others. That says moderate. What's good about it is depending what you're using it for. If you're using it for heat, it's incredibly efficient. If you're using it to spin a turbine to make electricity, then it's a little less efficient. You've got an exchange there between heat and mechanical. What's bad about it? Well, it only works efficiently in a few places around the world, and it's completely tied to plate tectonics, those plate boundaries that the earth cracks open. It makes sense to use geothermal there, not many other places. Iceland is a wonderful example of geothermal being used for cheap power. They sit right atop a diverging boundary. Magma literally coming right up to the surface. Geothermal is stinky. There's sulfur in the magma, and sulfur smells like rotten eggs. You see that yellow on the left-hand picture? A little yellow buildup is the sulfur precipitating out of the magma and the gas. It's also corrosive. You have heat pollution, which is called thermal. It can cause the ground to become salty. You can't grow things around it. And in the United States, it only makes up 1% of our energy budget. So once again, simply not a replacement for fossil fuels. It can help out here and there, but definitely not a solution. Now you can see the general idea here. We heat up water, and that creates steam. Oh, that's just like a coal plant, right? Except we're not actually burning anything. We can pump the water back down into the ground. Big loop. Now, even though it only makes up 1% of our energy budget, the United States uses so much energy that we're the largest in the world in terms of geothermal. We even use more geothermal than Iceland. But once again, that's because of our size and how much energy we actually consume. You can see the western states are where this is happening. That makes sense because that's the plate boundary, where the Pacific plate and North American plate come together. And of course, Hawaii, which is what we call a tectonic hotspot. Here's the biggest problem, in my opinion. If you have to post a sign like this, well, then that's not, once again, a green solution. Hydrogen sulfide, fatal. Okay, I'm out. Not interested in a solution that can be fatal. Keep upwind. Do not breathe gas. What am I supposed to breathe then? Now, that may look like pollution. What actually is that? Anybody know what's coming out of those stacks? That's just steam. That's water. Now, it turns out water is a greenhouse gas. Now, we actually have geothermal in Indiana, but it's not used to make electricity. It's not hot enough. Our magma is 10, 15 miles underneath our bedrock. In a place like Iceland, it's a mile underneath. So our magma is too deep for us to get to it. However, if you've ever been in a cave, which Indiana has a lot of, you could go in a cave on a day like today, where it's 15 degrees outside. You could take your jacket off inside that cave. It's going to be 50 degrees in there. You could go in the middle of August when it's 95 degrees outside, and that cave is going to be 50 degrees. That cave is always 50 degrees, no matter what's happening out here. All right, so anyway, we can pump that groundwater, which is 100, 200 meters deep. We can pump that into our homes. You Google geothermal in Indiana and you can install it. What they do is they run that groundwater through your floors, and it helps heat up your home, especially in the wintertime or in the extreme summertime. It'll cool your home. So you can install different types of water cycling systems. And it's a closed loop. You don't worry about pollution or anything. It's just water from underground being used to moderate the temperatures in your home. Here's Yellowstone, which is a giant hotspot out west. That's Old Faithful, which honestly, I've never been there. I've heard it's kind of boring. You sit there and wait 70 minutes and then it sort of erupts. And yeah, what did he do? There are some other geysers in the park that are much more impressive, much more regular, but it's the famous one. So why don't we use that energy in Wyoming? Why isn't geothermal more popular? It was not on those top states list. Anybody know why? No one lives there. That geothermal energy is wasted because we would lose too much efficiency to send that energy somewhere else. Same thing with Alaska. Tons of geothermal energy, but nobody around to actually use it. I like this. I got this off Twitter. Somebody was complaining. They posted this awesome video in Hawaii. What a beautiful eruption. See, somebody had a nasty comment. Not a single thermal generator in sight. So annoying that we don't run pipes and steam engines off of volcanoes. Well, of course, the person who snapped and posted that on Twitter was ignorant, because of course we do. The next person replied with this picture, which is the thermal generator plant right next to the lava flow. So there's risk, right? Building next to something like that. All right, last one I'd like to cover real quickly today is tidal and wave energy. And it's got the exact same problems as geothermal. It doesn't work in a lot of places or make sense in a lot of places. So very location specific. If you were to ask Mr. Gropp, his bottom three would be biofuel, geothermal, and wave energy. In principle, it's a great idea. People worry about damage to aquatic ecosystems, harming the fish that get nearby. We've come up with some solutions for some of that, putting the turbines in cages that allow the water through, but not the small animals. There's lots of different designs going on here. You have the problem of you make the energy offshore and you have to bring it onshore. So here you see the cables down on the bottom of the ocean. So you have some engineering challenges, some efficiency loss because of that. These are some areas where we think tidal energy actually makes a lot of sense. And once again, you look at Alaska, and the problem is nobody lives there. Now, Southern California is already using some of this, and even parts of the northeastern United States have seen some benefit from tidal technology. And as the technology improves, the cost comes down. Where we are seeing the best results from tidal or wave energy is Western Europe. They are kind of leading right now on the technology and the efficiency of this energy. And you can see lots of different creative designs that have popped up the last couple of years. All right, we got 3 out of 8 done. Tomorrow I'm going to go through 2 more, and we'll finish the rest up next week, of course.